Batman the Animated Series. Calling it one of the greatest achievements of DC, Warner Brothers, and just Batman as a whole would be an understatement. It was the start of the DC animated universe. It would introduce a whole new generation of kids to characters like Tim Drake, Static, Hawkgirl, and of course our greatest hero, Green Lantern, but also created its own beloved characters like Terry McGinnis, Blight, the Grey Ghost, the Phantasm, Livewire, and everyone's favorite ball of crazy, Harley Quinn. Though it does suck that Loomis never made it to comics, which, yeah, no, he's a really cool character. Check out the episodes Superman the Animated Series, Target, and Solar Power. You'll see what I mean. And though the DCAU would officially end in May of 2006, DC writers and animators would always tend to return to this era, like with Batman Beyond's short by Darwin Cook for the Batman 75th anniversary in 2014, the animated film, the Justice League vs. the Fatal Five in 2021, and of course, there's the comic that started all the way back in 2010 with Batman Superman Annual number 4. I know some of you are gonna point out that some references and cameos that showed up in stories like Batman Superman Vengeance, where Batman Beyond faced Bizarro. I don't count that since they did make it clear later on that that was a completely different character. Yes, it was in the Batman Beyond costume, but it was not Terry McGinnis, but instead a version of Tim Drake under the mask. Point is, the annual is the real start. The DC universe was back, and even designated its own Earth, Earth 12 of the DC multiverse. However, they mostly stuck in the Beyond timeline, only returned to the animated series / unlimited timeline in flashbacks and origin stories. Though that would change in 2016 with, interestingly enough, a crossover. Batman TMNT Adventures, which had Batman from the DCAU cross paths with the 2012 takes on the Turtles. And like the previous crossover in the animated film, it was a smash hit. Now, it's never been confirmed if this was the reason for what happened next, but I personally like to think it did, as not long after, DC would eventually announce that they would be officially bringing back the animated series in the form of webcomics, available on the DC app under the name Batman The Adventure Continues. It couldn't have happened in a better time, as by the time the series was ready for publishing, it was 2020. And I don't think I need to explain the horrors that went down during that year. So yeah, comic shops were pretty much closed down, and a lot of comic companies had to postpone their main projects. This was definitely a time for the book to shine. But did it deliver? Well, that's why we're here. We're gonna cover season 1. Yeah, it likes to make it feel more like it's part of the show. Of Batman, The Adventure Continues, and see if it's worthy of being part of the DCAU run. Warning, spoilers. So as this comic has depicted itself as a sort of lost season of the animated series / New Adventures, this follows the same format. Instead of having one big arc, it's actually in 5 stories that themselves were split into multiple parts when first published on the app, with story 4 having the most parts. There is an ongoing story in the background that leads to one of the stories later, but we'll get to that in a bit. I will, though, be holding on covering the 5th story, as that story is for a more jolly season. Our first story, Hardware, opens with a pretty regular night in Gotham, as Batman is in the middle of chasing the villain, the breaker of bats, and lover of proper grammar, Bane. If you know, you know. But it only lasts for a few seconds, because Batman hit Bane with a tranquilizer before the fight even started. It's just thanks to the super drug Venom that it just now kicked in. So Batman made quick work of Bane without any real effort. Here we go, another case of Bat prep time and how he can do anything with it. But in all seriousness, it shows how much Batman has gotten so used to these villains. He's seen all their tricks and now knows how to counter them. That could end up being a double-edged sword though, as after dealing with Bane, he has to deal with a giant robot that seemingly came out of nowhere and attacks Wayne Tech. Batman tries to stop it, but it's a giant robot and, well, as skilled as he is really ill-prepared for it. And it gets away with a vault from Wayne Tech Labs, all while someone watches from the distance. Bruce tries to find it using the Wayne satellites in the Batcave, but it seems that this robot is too advanced. And given the fact the vault was filled with alien technology Superman gave him to help study and understand, this is a big deal. But Alpha reminds him that he does have to make an appearance at a party hosted by Veronica Vreeland. Bruce was planning on canceling to focus on finding the robot, but good old Alfred brings up how the party seems to have a very interesting guest of honor, Lex Luthor. He mentions the events of Superman the Animated Series crossover multi-parter World's Finest, explaining why he tries to avoid Gotham as much as he can. He also brings up how it is just a shame that Superman seems to be MIA, because he could have flattened that robot, and Bruce wouldn't have lost so much money from the lab. Hey Lex, do you want some ice for your hands? They look a bit red. Bruce checks in on Clark, but yeah, it's clear that he truly is missing. So now Batman has 2 mysteries to solve, though the former is already reaching its end as he found the robot. How? Prep time. Turns out the vault was taken to Claremont Airfield, which would eventually be the home to Bruce's last outing as Batman in Batman Beyond. Bruce is able to handle the armed men with no problem and finds both the vault and the robot. But, shocked by no one, it is revealed that Lex was behind all of it, as he attacks Batman with his newly built battle armor, which is technically its first appearance since, well, you see, before— We get it! Tight continuity, get to the point. Fine. Lex would reveal that the vault contains the remains of Brainiac, which was gathered after the Superman episode Nighttime. What did I say? It's important for context. Yeah, as you can guess, this series really relies on that you are already a fan of the DC anime universe, so they don't really explain stuff like why did Superman have a Brainiac head. The comic does get better at this as the story goes on, but we'll discuss that later. As for what Lex wants and the deal with the robot, I'll let you guys see for yourselves. After the next story, Mentors, we once again see the mysterious figure spying on Batman, who this time is with Batgirl and Tim Drake Robin fighting Clayface, who is apparently pissed off that Hollywood decided to make a reboot of one of his films without his involvement. Honestly, a lot of Transformers fans could relate to that. I mean, I'm looking forward to this, and nothing against Ron Perlman, who, funny enough, also played Clayface in the show, but they couldn't even consider Gary Chalk. As the fight goes on, some of us readers are reminded of one of the most depressing episodes of the animated series. The Bat family gets a surprise assistance from Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke. He seemed to have come in Gotham in peace, but Batman, knowing his reputation, is already suspicious. Though as him and Gordon are looking through the files trying to learn what he's up to, Slade comes to Batgirl and makes it clear that he is very interested in her. As a partner, I mean. Yeah, this story might be a little bit more mature, but not that mature, and also not that messed up. Later, Robin spots Deathstroke heading into the museum, and despite orders not to follow, he does so. Slade tells him his mission. He was apparently hired to find Garfield Lynn, aka the Firefly, who, unlike the Brainiac Kid, actually gets a bit of a backstory, as Slade tells an abridged version of his origin story from the episode Torch Song, while filling in on what happened after the events of the episode. Apparently, he became a hired gun, and during one mission, apparently got a bit of an upgrade. And though now it seems that Slade is telling the truth, we have to remember, it's still Slade. Third story, The Dark Knight, Batman is chasing Catwoman after a robbery, only for her to be ambushed by Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. Yeah, you can probably see the pattern here. Each story seems to open the same way, with Batman being in the middle of dealing with a foe that he's very familiar with, only to be distracted by a new foe dropping in and kicking off the main story. It's not a bad formula, but it does lose its impact by this point. Luckily, they dropped this for story 4. Batman is able to save Catwoman from Azrael's wrath, but the Avenging Angel shows up at Wayne Manor, revealing that he knows who Bruce is. As it turns out, Bruce Wayne and Jean-Paul have a past. During one of his travels, Bruce actually studied under the Order of Saint Dumas, and knows how serious these guys are, especially when Azrael reveals why he's after Catwoman. Apparently, she stole a mystic shawl that was sacred to the Order of Saint Dumas. The Shawl of Magdalene is believed to have healing powers, but Bruce never really believed in it, at least at the time. He promises to help Azrael find it, even providing him armor that will look a little bit more like the Bat family's to sell toys. Well, I mean, to let authorities know that they can totally trust him, as long as he leaves Catwoman alone. Azrael agrees, but it's Azrael, and if you know your comics, you know that most men who have held the mantle of Azrael are a bit unstable, which shows when Azrael gets a bit too aggressive with the one who hired Catwoman to steal the shawl, the Penguin. Unfortunately, it turns out that Penguin is just the middleman, and due to Azrael's aggression, he has sicked his newest muscle on them, a giant bird mutant named Mr. Wing. You're probably wondering where Mr. Wing came from. Anyway, Batman deals with Wing, Azrael beats the ever-living crap out of Penguin, and eventually gets the answers. How does that go? Let's just say Azrael's fiery rage will face a cold abyss. We wrap up things for now with the fourth story, Red Sun Rising, as we see the Joker and his new partner, a leg breaker named Straight Man, realizing that they have a visitor, the mysterious figure who's been spying on the Bat family throughout the book. And after an insane fight inside the Joker's hideout, destroying the place, Batman and the cops come in to see the aftermath. Batman finds bullets that belong to the figure, and after studying the fingerprints at the Batcave, it's revealed that the mysterious figure is none other than Jason Todd, the second Robin. Now, this one was a big hook for the series, as fans were wondering how they were gonna fit Jason in this continuity, since in the main series, they skipped Jason and went straight for Tim Drake. Speaking of, Alfred tells Tim Jason's story. In this continuity, Jason actually grew up with a brother named Danny, who tried to be a part of a street gang called the Wolves. As a form of initiation, every new member has to wear a red hood while they commit a crime. Unfortunately, Dan did not survive the initiation. Jason, sporting a red hood and a domino mask, tracked down the gang and faced them off, at first planning to kill their leader, but Batman would show up and actually talk Jason into having him face justice instead, and leading to Bruce taking Jason in and Jason taking the mantle of Robin. How did Jason supposedly die? What will he do as a newly christened Red Hood? And how did it affect Bruce's relationship with Leslie Tompkins, as she did disappear in the animated series? Well, it's pretty obvious by this point, but you're gonna have to read the book to find out. This comic is pretty damn fun. Sure, it's not perfect, really relying on you already watching stuff from the DCAU, but it's not to the point where it totally sucks you out. The rest of the stories do their best to fill in the new readers, with bits of history like Firefly, the stuff regarding the end of Azrael's story, and of course how Jason Todd fits in the continuity. Jason especially had to be a challenge, since unlike Slade, who just showed up to Gotham, or Azrael, who at least had connections to Batman regarding his past, like Zatanna or the Ninja, Jason was a character that had to be right smack dab in the middle of Bruce's career in crime fighting. The book had two writers, both of which wrote for Batman the Animated Series and the New Adventures. Alan Burnett, who worked on both writing, producing for DC Animation, all the way back before DCAU in 1984's Super Friends, a legendary superpowered show. Yes, so legendary people still fear their power in their pants. And was one of the writers for 1993's Batman Mask of the Phantasm, one of my favorite movies. And Paul Dini, who along with Bruce Timm was one of the head writers of the animated series, and pretty much stayed on the DCAU until the very end and onward, as he became one of the writers for DC that would come back for almost every future show. Even ran some comics like Detective Comics, Streets of Gotham, and one of my personal favorites, Heart of Hush. And they definitely haven't lost their touch. You can tell they had fun returning to this world. Even with the challenge of adding new elements to this canon, they made it feel natural. If I had to rank these stories excluding the final one, I had to say Jason's story was number 1, Slade being a close second, Lex at third, and Azrael unfortunately being the weakest. Which really hurt to say because I love Azrael. Hell, his debut story was the first Batman comic I read. But here, I'll get more into it when I discuss characters, but he feels unnecessary to the plot. Like, you could have replaced him with any established DC character like Etrigan and the story would have felt the same. The Order of Saint Dumas is non-existent. Like, yeah, Azrael talks about them, but that's it. And the mystery goes way too fast. By the time the mastermind's revealed, we barely have time to have it sink in. The first and fifth story are short, but they felt better handled. Azrael's story feels like it was just ad-lib for most of it. Like, they wanted to do Jason's story sooner, but they didn't have enough time, so they had to write this story to, just fill it in. It was just disappointing. So yeah, if I had any major complaint, story-wise, it's mostly due to the third story. Moving on to characters, we start with Batman. And as I said before, the writers have not lost their touch. This feels like a Batman who thinks it has everything figured out, only to be proven wrong when it has to deal with new challenges, especially things like the robot, which was made from technology that he was just now understanding. There's also a Batman who's not afraid to admit when he makes mistakes, especially when we get into Jason's story. It's a good reminder that Batman is still human. He can and will make mistakes, but he's willing to own up to it and make things right. Next, we got Tim Drake, aka Robin, and though he is the youngest of the Robins, well, at least in this canon, shows he's pretty damn skilled. This is especially rewarding if you watch the New Adventure series, as it really feels like a coming-of-age story now, which unfortunately does make things more heartbreaking knowing what would happen to Tim later. And to those who don't know what I'm talking about, well, let's just say in Batman Beyond, it's revealed that Joker did something to Tim that was arguably worse to what he did to Jason. But all around, it reminded me why I like Tim Drake, before DC stopped knowing what the hell to do with the character. Next, we got Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, and though she doesn't have much in the case of a story arc, the comic really reminds us why Batman later in the series did make her his right hand, and only right hand. Luckily, Dini Burnett spare us the uncomfortableness that was the Bruce and Barbara relationship in New Adventures, so I'm spared to talk about it for now, because despite being told to avoid Slade during the story, she is trusted to follow her own cases, and figured out what Slade was doing pretty quickly. Lex is also pretty much on point. Like when I hear Conroy's voice when I read Batman, I hear Clancy Brown's voice whenever I read Lex. You definitely get the sense of arrogance when he talks, whether it's to Bruce Wayne when he low-key taunts him for the theft, or how he mocks Batman as he sees himself as someone beneath him, a man who dealt with aliens and godlike beings. To him, Batman is just a mere mortal, though, as we know, there's nothing mere about Batmortal. But yeah, great choice to have Lex as the first big bad of the series. It was definitely cool to see them fight in something other than a Superman or Justice League story. story. It was nicely handled. Deathstroke had a very interesting introduction. Not the whole posing as a friend to get close to the hero bit, that's old hat for the character, but how he approaches it is very interesting. When he first shows up, he comes off as a Boy Scout and kind of talks like a modern version of Adam West's Batman, which I'm all for. It gives more of an unpredictable element to the character. Yes, you know he's gonna backstab everyone, and he has his own twisted plan to steal Bruce's partners, but it's how he does it that makes it interesting. This add to his character was probably done to help differentiate him from his Teen Titans counterpart. Though I'll be honest, I could still hear Ron Perlman's voice in this version. So solid Slade. And now we move on to Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. Besides stuff I mentioned before, like how he really doesn't add much to the story, he also just lacks all the things that people like about Azrael. When Azrael and the Order of Saint Dumas were first introduced, there was a sense of mystery and dread, not unlike the Court of Owls. The Order was a place where it was unpredictable. This was a group that would even turn on each other if they had to. Azrael, or at least Jean-Paul, embodied fighting the nurture versus nature concept. He wanted to help people, but due to the twisted things that they made him do as a child to make him the avenging angel, he's left in fear that he could relapse, that he could never truly be free. This character doesn't have anything close to that level of depth or character drama. He's just this guy that Bruce knows who talks like a noble knight with a hint of arrogance. When he attacked Penguin during the fight with Mr. Wing, I thought that maybe it was hinting that we were going to lead to the inner struggle, but nope. It's barely talked about. The only way I could see them saving this version is if it's revealed that this isn't Jean-Paul Valley Jr. and it's actually his father, Jean-Paul Sr. And maybe next time we'll see him take up the mantle of Azrael like his father. Joker is up next, and what can I say? It's Paul Dini on the animated series Joker, in a story that's not bound by the networks to make it for kids. He's funny, he's terrifying, he's entertaining, and whenever he shows up, you know things are gonna get insane. And in the sense of the Red Hood story, more intense. They do not hold back when they get on the topic of how Joker took out Jason. And finally, there's the character everyone was waiting for, the one everyone was questioning on how exactly he was going to fit into everything. The prodigal son, Mr. Wing. Just kidding, Jason, of course, obviously. Jason here feels a lot like the Jason from both the Under the Red Hood movie and a bit of the Arkhamverse, as from his design, his goals, and his demeanor is more in line with the animated film. Jason was angry at Bruce, yes, but it was less towards what happened to him and more towards Bruce's unwillingness to let the villains die, to let go of the no-kill rule. And when I say Bruce is unwilling, I mean Bruce, as Jason sees Batman as a symbol that Gotham does need, but the problem being the man behind the mask. Jason thinks Batman could figure out that not everyone could change, but Bruce does. And that is why he believes he will fail in the end. As for where the Arkhamverse elements are, it's mostly in how he approaches everything. If you're only familiar with the Arkham games, you're probably raising an eyebrow right now, as in the game, he's mostly just using brute force by raising hell with Deathstroke and his own militia, only using stealth as a way to fight Batman. However, in the tie-in comics, we actually see Jason being a master of stealth and spycraft, watching Batman so closely, but Bruce didn't notice. Also, like in the Arkhamverse, he is more willing to put people into death traps. However, despite his more twisted view on himself and Gotham, we do see hints that he might not totally be lost. He's just unwilling to admit it. It's a take on the character that I really hope the writers continue with. The art was done by Ty Templeton, who is a pretty damn talented artist, as he's done comics based on shows before, each one with their own unique style from one another. Yet Templeton has been able to match the style each time, retaining the feeling that the readers would have when watching the show. Whether it's the sharp, angular noir style of Batman the Animated Series, the cartoony style of The Simpsons, or even going more realistic with Batman 66. He even did some work for Marvel back in the day. The art here does continue that streak, for the most part. Most of the designs, particularly the new additions like Slade and Jason, are right on the money when it comes to the DCAU. Especially dig Jason's Robin design. Templeton could have easily given Jason Tim's red suit, or maybe even just Dick Grayson's suit, but instead he got a suit that actually combines elements from both Dick Grayson's suit from the animated series, parts of his pre-Crisis look, even a bit of the New 52 look. As for looks I don't think work, well, let's first start with Mr. Wing. Yeah, I'm not even sure why he's called Mr. Wing, because despite the fact that he has feathers and he's, based off an owl, he doesn't actually have wings. Plus his size is pretty inconsistent, where sometimes he's as big as the Hulk and other times he's slightly taller than Bruce. Then of course there's Azrael. He looks like he's wearing pool floaties. The mask was an interesting choice as it kind of resembled the Phantasm. In fact, I was really excited when I saw that, thinking it meant that we could see Andrea again and maybe reveal that she was part of the Order of Saint Dumas. I mean, the film never really explained how she became such a skilled assassin. Plus, with her calling herself the Angel of Death, that actually would work pretty well with the Order of Saint Dumas. It's kind of their bag, but no, unfortunately, it never happened. and they immediately switched off to the Nightfall suit. They also have a nice sense of continuity, as when we flash back to Jason, we do see everyone sporting their original designs from the animated series. Hell, in the 5th story, we actually find out there's an explanation of why Penguin looks so different. Turns out that fall did end up with him going to the hospital and having to have some serious surgery. Wasn't necessary to bring up, but I appreciate it. On a whole, this was a well-welcomed comic. Brought back some classic characters without nostalgia baiting, even brought us stories that you wanted to see in the OG series. It might not totally have struck the landing, but it's a start and worthy to be part of a beloved series legacy. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and next time we'll continue the theme of looking at another continuation of a beloved title, though this one might not be canon, well, anymore. It's still a work of art. Later.